Off the back of one of the best performances this season up against the Dolphins in Auckland last weekend, this week we're off to Canberra. Time to spoil Croker's 300. Let's take a look at this might play out. Hey team, welcome back to the Warriorholic. Definitely an awesome game last weekend there against the Dolphins. Took us a little while to get going there in the first half, but finally that attack clicked into place in the second half. Put on a very, very solid effort there, some quality tries up against the quality opposition. Many thought were down a couple of players with the likes of the Hammer and Marshall King out, but we can't forget that the Warriors had a lot of our good players, like we had Jazz, we had Dylan, we had Tamati Martin. We had a bunch of guys still out, so I think it was a pretty even matchup all in all. But the boys did the damage, came out on top. Everyone was pretty bloody happy with that effort, but it's time to reset and step it up another level to go up against the Green Machine over there in Canberra. We know it's one of the hardest road trips on the competition, but so just looking at their recent form, I watched the Raiders on the weekend there and compared their stats during the week. They were actually pretty flat. They got no line breaks in the whole game. They got 3 tries all off kicks. 2 of them were lucky bounces where the halfback managed to kick it into the pads and bounce back into his own hands twice. You don't think that happens 2 weeks in a row. So they've had a couple of changes with Whitehead, Croker and Chris coming back in, but none of those 3 are really going to contribute hugely to their attacking ability there. So it'll be interesting to see how we go. Our defence has been really resilient over the past couple of weeks. We haven't let in a lot of tries. So they're going to have to get pretty creative all of a sudden, and we're going to have to let our D slip. If we can play the same level I think we played up against the Dolphins, there's every chance we could win this. So another interesting stat from them is they only managed to defuse about 67% of their kicks in the weekend, versus I think we're up about 83% is our average at the moment. So look for Sean to be putting up a few kicks and putting their outside backs under pressure. We know Rapana's generally pretty good, but he's a bit hot and cold at times, so get a bit of pressure on him early and we might be all right there. And the other thing they had was 50 missed tackles. That's about 20 more than us. Actually, I think it's about 23 more than us. So all in all, the stats from last week lean to show that there's every reason we should have confidence to go into this game. The whole Croker thing often, I think that can work against teams when they get so emotionally hyped for it. They're not ready for a barrage from the opposition. If our forwards can hit the ground running like they did against the Dolphins with that aggressive, high-speed line defence, I think we can put them off their game from the start and spoil this party. So, righto, looking at the head-to-head matchups here, we've played 44 times, 23 wins to them, 21 for us. Be good to get one back on them here. I think it's been pretty even over the past couple of years. We've sort of gone win for win with them. We've probably been more successful against the Raiders than a lot of teams, particularly during that COVID period. With that famous win where SJ managed to kick a couple of drop goals to get us into golden point and then win the game. Breaking Ricky's lunch there, so breaking his heart, breaking his lunch, one of the two. So it'd be nothing better than to see that happen again this week and see Ricky lose his rag in the press conference, which is one of the most entertaining things in the whole of NRL. Points for and against there. They've scored 280 versus our 256. But they've led in a heck of a lot more. There were 329 points led in versus our 244. So I think our defence is definitely a lot more consistent, more resilient than theirs there. Likewise, they've been a little bit up and down in attack. They've had a lot of 28-32 kind of scores over the year for them, whereas ours have generally, I think we've only had 3 games that have gone up over the 30-point mark or at the 30-point mark, whereas I think well over half of theirs have. Completion efficiency is basically the same, 78 versus 80 there. Tackle efficiency is very similar, and play the ball speed, again, very similar. So overall, history, sort of recent form, they're coming off the back. I think they've had 5 wins out of their last 7 games or something like that, or 6 wins out of their last 7, whereas we've just had a couple. They seem to be on a bit of a roll, but again, watching them in the weekend there, I don't think we've got anything to be majorly scared of if we can deliver. I think they'll have to play at their best and we'll have to be off for them to get the win. Likewise, if they're off and we play to our best, we'll beat them. So it's a pretty 50-50 game all in all. Let's take a look at the matchups here. So first up at fullback, we've got my man Charles Nigel Clogstead up against Sebastian Chris, the other Kiwi boy there. I think Chance will be out to prove a bit of a point up against his old club there, getting dropped down into reserve grade close to the end of his time. If not being pushed into the centres, had very limited time at fullback. I think he's more than proven this season for the Warriors that he is a class fullback. And due to injuries and form drop-offs and the like, they've been through a few different fullbacks at Canberra this year. So look for a chance to really look to make a statement game, or have a statement game here. I do like Chris, solid player. Looking at the games there, 11 versus 12 games each. 187 average running metres for Chance versus 164. Not a huge amount in it, but Chance does often get up over the 200 mark. Tackle efficiency is a big difference here. We've got 88 for Chance versus 68 for Chris, which is one of the worst of the fullbacks that I've reviewed or previewed so far this season. Tackle breaks 44 versus 36. Line breaks 2 versus 4. Try assists 2 versus 1. I think they both had 2 tries apiece, so not overly dissimilar in the stats, but I just think in form, the whole wanting to prove a point thing here, I do think Chance is going to get one up over Chris here. Chris was out last week, so he had that week off. I'm not exactly sure what his injury was. But coming back in this week, who knows, he might be slightly out of sync, but look for Chance to have a big one here and dominate this matchup. And on the wing, to start out with, we've got another battle of the Kiwis here with Dallin up against Jordan Rapana. 2 guys who can play fullback, play wing, similar kind of experience, been around for a long time. Similar number of games this year with 7 for Dallin, 9 for Rapana. Dallin with a significantly more running metres at the moment, with up to 168. He's been averaging up over the 200 mark over the past 2 or 3 rounds. I think in the first couple of weeks there he sort of struggled for metres, but he's really lifted that up, which is bringing his overall average up, with Rapana only with 117, which kind of surprised me. And this is one of the things I think we do have a bit more strength in, was the way we use our back 5 to head up that ball off our own line, giving our forwards that break. They don't tend to do that as much, and when they do, their forwards don't have the same penetration as we do. So that's definitely a strength I think that Dallin's going to have over Rapana. Tackle breaks 33 versus 29, and that's in 2 less games. Line breaks 7 versus 5, 7 tries versus 6. So again, both very experienced, similar players. But again, Rapana does have a nightmare in him. Dallin's had a couple of brain explosions on defence, but overall he's been very consistent over the past sort of 5 or 6 weeks. So watching Rapana in the weekend, he played at fullback and he didn't have his best game ever. So, his old mate Croker, he might look to get up for him, but I think this will be quite an even matchup. But purely on recent form, I've got to give it to Dallin. I'm looking for him to continue that energy and that, particularly with the post-contact metres he's been able to generate. Montoya up against Hopoate. This will be a battle of the big boys, both very solid, large lads. 13 games for Montoya. He's played every game for us versus 11 for Hopoate. Hopoate, both of them actually, 168 versus 164 in the running metre. So both, really good metre eaters there. 69.6% tackle efficiency there for Montoya. Missed a couple of vital ones there in the weekend. He was, up until probably a month ago, he was up in the sort of mid-80s. So a couple of missed tackles there have dropped his down. 78.6 for Hopoate. So, he's not the greatest, highest percentage tackler out there either. Tackle breaks 40 versus 41. Line breaks 10 versus 7. 4 tries versus 9. So obviously a lot of tries are coming out there wide to Hopoate. So we're going to have to do a good job to try and contain him. Hopefully that the centres and the wings can combine a little bit better on that edge and not let those bloody tries in. We've seen a couple sneak through there recently. So another fairly even matchup. I don't think Montoya's been in the absolute best of form recently. I just feel like he just hasn't quite had the same amount of impact. He's had a couple of running games down around the 140, 150 mark rather than up around the 200 like he usually does. So hopefully he'll come up with a big one, but I'm going to call this one pretty much for 50-50 for me. Next up, we've got the excitement machine, the young debutant Ali Leiataua. Ali Leiataua, I think that's how we get it. I don't have his stats, obviously, since his first ever game of NRL, but I've popped in his cup stats here. 13 games, averaging 136 metres, 83% tackle efficiency, 51 tackle breaks, 9 line breaks, 9 tries. Pretty much outstanding. Some of the best numbers out of any of our cup guys, but again, it's a big step up here. Coming up against another Kiwi boy here in Timoko. He's played all 13 games, 158 running metres on average there. It's pretty good for a centre. 86% tackle efficiency, 55 line breaks, tackle breaks, 6 line breaks and 4 tries. It's going to be a really good test straight out of the bloody barrel here for young Ali. If he can match it with Timoko, who, Madge Maguire is looking seriously as a potential centre for New Zealand this year, I think he'll be able to show whether he can actually match it at this level at the moment. He's still only a young boy, but very big, very fast, seems quite aggressive but controlled. Similar to Timoko, he's not one of those crazy guys who's going to get all angry and look to have a fight, but he definitely plays with a lot of heart, very high intensity, pretty quick. So, you've got to give it to Timoko here on experience, obviously, but just on excitement factor. Webby obviously sees something in Ali that he's brought him up ahead of Williami, who, for me, he was a really standout in the first few games of the season before he did his calf. So let's see if he can step up and prove that he's the man for the rest of the season at centre there. On the other side, we've got Pompey versus Croker. This is going to be an interesting one. Croker having the week off last week to allow him to play his 300th home in Canberra. He's a workhorse, he's a grinder, he's obviously been around for a long time, but for me, I've never really thought he's, he's consistent without being flash. He's that kind of workhorse. If we look at the numbers here, he's only played 7 games this year, he spent a lot of time in Cup. For his time he spent up here, he's only hitting 71 metres versus Pompey's up over 110 now. Tackle efficiency, 86 versus 75. This is something that Croker's always been a bit of a, had a bit of a weakness at his defence. Back in the day, he used to have a lot of trouble handling old Connie Harrell. So hopefully, big Pompey there, 190 centimetres tall, can put a lot of pressure on him. He's run through a lot better defending centres so far this year. So also gives away, significant height advantage there to Pompey. So you might see a few kicks going up over top of him. But obviously, he's seems like a great guy. His teammates will be getting up there for him. Hopefully, we can spoil the party for him. It's a big one, 300, but, so often teams, as I mentioned earlier, they get so excited about it, they lose focus on the real fundamentals of the game. So I'm sure Webby will have our boys aware of that and be looking to take out that emotion right from the first few minutes. So yeah, on this one here, I'm actually going to give it to my man Pompey, to be honest, even though it's just 300. So I think Pompey's been playing relatively well, other than a little bit of defensive lapse, but he's been able to get up and over top of a lot of his competition, so I see no reason why I can't do that to Croker this week. Metcalf up against White, and another old bull versus new bull or young bull kind of competition here. Metcalf started to come into his own last week, I think, getting that Egan ball out wide earlier in his hands with a bit of room to move. A little bit less of line speed there from the Dolphins gave Metcalf a little bit of a chance to show us some of his skills. He got that awesome try off the back of the offload from Sirinen to Niakore, and then off to Metcalf where he just burned away. A couple of good involvements here and other tries out wide as first receiver. But, Jake Whiten, one of the strongest, most aggressive 5'8" in the game. So it's going to be a really, really tough matchup here for Metcalf. I'd imagine they'll be putting a lot of line speed up against him again to put pressure on him and take his time away. Likewise with Whiten, he's just such a strong runner, great kicking game, great under pressure. So I'm going to have to give this to Whiten. I mean, he's close to the same size as Pompey, 100 metre 90 tall for a 5'8", that coming up a pretty slight guy in Metcalf there. Whilst they might not directly face each other too often, might be on opposite sides of the field, I think that, just the class and experience will probably get Whiten home there. Next up, the halfbacks. Got the old fella in outstanding form there, and Johnson up against Fogarty. Pretty solid halfback, Fogarty. He's got a pretty solid short kicking game, but I think he'd struggle to get a starting position in most NRL clubs. I think he's a bit of a fill-in there. They definitely rely a lot on Whiten for their creative stuff and to have the impact. 14 games for Johnson up against 13 for Fogarty. Kicking metres 560 for Johnson versus 376 there. And that's a bit of a reflection that Whiten does a lot of the kicking. Tackle efficiency is 79.2, which has dropped down. For SJ, he was up around 95 there for most of the season. I think he's just missed the 2 or 3 tackles recently. So 94 for Fogarty, so he's definitely a good defender there. He's quite a solid guy, as you can see. Try assist 11 versus 7. Line break assist 11 versus 3. Tries 4 versus 3. So when it comes to creativity and running the game, SJ wins this one all day. But, Fogarty did pull off those kicks, intentionally kicking into the pads twice last weekend to get those tries, bounce off, coming back straight into his hand. So, he's got a really good sort of, interesting short kicking game, but doesn't offer a huge amount else. So I think, we'll put in a lot of it. He doesn't offer a heck of a lot else, so we'll be putting a lot of pressure on him to try and sort of isolate him, and that way they're left to just have Whiten as their main creating half. Right, next up, the big boys here. 2 very large, very impactful props here. Adam Fanua-Blake up against Josh Papali'i. Obviously, the Fanua-Blake being the slightly younger man these days, and probably some of his career form at the moment. Papali'i's been struggling a little bit for form recently. Obviously, deciding to step away from State of Origin, probably a reflection that he was likely to be, dropped from what I hear. If you look at the numbers, you can see that obviously Adam's having that bigger impact at the moment. 161 average running metres versus 139. 761 post-contact metres versus 500. Both basically on 96% tackle efficiency. Tackle breaks 42 versus only 17, and 5 tries versus none. Papali'i will be another one. He'll be up for this. He's played a lot of games with Croker. He'll be looking to have a big statement game for him, but I can't see Adam Fanua-Blake taking a step back. I think having his bro Mitch Barnett in there, setting the way with those big hits and the line speed, I think Adam will be up for this, and I honestly think he's going to win this battle quite comfortably, I would say. This will be a little bit different. Bunty up against Tapine. A lot of sort of conjecture as to why Bunty continues to start there. We've constantly sort of mentioned about his lack of metres, only 64 average metres versus 165, so Tapine's getting 100 more metres than him a game. Post-contact metres, Tapine's actually got more there than AFB, 792 versus 282. So a very different type of prop there, both with really solid tackle efficiencies. Tackle breaks 11 for Bunty and only 17 for Tapine, which is surprising given the post-contact metres. 1 try versus none. Again, I think Bunty's, we're using him a lot of that to blunt that defence, their attack with his defence in the first 20. Trying to get in there and being one of the first hitters on their forwards to save the energy for Adam. I think Webby's got a plan of how to use them, and it seems to be working, but this is going to be a real challenge up against Tapine, who's been playing at 13 or on an edge recently, but is moving back into the front row there. As I said, he's not having the same impact as he was last year. The talk around him when he re-signed with Canberra is he could have been $1 million player going to other clubs. I don't think he's quite lived up to that this year, but I think he'll offer a bit more than Bunty does. I'm going to give that one to him. Wade Egan against Wolford. Didn't Egan make a difference last week? I said it in my post-game review. He's just continues to make me smile and prove that I didn't know anything about what a good hooker should look like, because I always questioned whether he was the guy who was good enough to take us deep into the finals. Clearly showing that he is, and it's just as a couple of steps he takes out of dummy half there, similar to Api Coruscant, just putting the opposition in a slight, 2 minds. Do they come at him, or do they hold back and wait for the first receiver? Very wide, crisp pass. Sometimes going 2 or 3 wide directly to the first receiver, which on the weekend was more often than not either SJ or Metcalf, rather than going through Tohu all the time. Just got our attack flowing really, really well. Just organised everything. So you can see that neither of them are big runners, average running of 52 metres versus 18, but Egan has started to run a bit more recently. I'm still not quite linking up with the support players, and I think that's more a fact that our runners aren't really aware of when he's going to go, and we're not up there supporting, but I'd really like to see Metcalf right on his shoulder when he makes those breaks. Tackle efficiency, both, mid-90s. Try assists, 1 each. Line break assists, 4 for Egan, 4 tries versus none. Wolford's a good solid 9, but watching him in the weekend, he's nothing flash. He's a grinder. Again, I don't imagine too many teams will be seeking him out as their starting hooker. They've got Starling on the bench there, who always comes in and adds sort of a bit of energy there, which is he's a little bit more of a nippy hooker. But yeah, I think Egan clearly wins this, and if he can maintain the form he showed last week and play another 70 minutes without getting any kind of injuries, I think he will definitely win that battle comfortably. Jackson Ford up against Ali at Whitehead. Both playing 11 games, neither of them with huge running meters, 96 versus 75. Both really relatively effective tacklers at around the 90% mark. More line breaks there, 5 for Ford versus 2 for Whitehead. Tackle breaks 24 versus 10 and 2 tries apiece. Whitehead's more of, he feels like a third prop for me. He's a grinder. He's not really the most creative. He's not really the most flamboyant, which is similar to the role that Ford plays, but we just know that when he gets into a gap, he does have the ability to really put his foot down. He's got the pace. He's got a good offload in him. Last week, he really impressed me by having no errors, giving away no penalties and no 6 again, and I'd really like to see him do that again this week. And if he can pull that off and maintain his intensity, probably look to get him subbed off at some point and not play such big minutes. I think he will win this battle. Whitehead coming off the back of a 2 or 3 game suspension, I think it was, so he'll probably be looking to have a point to prove, but I'm going to rate my man Ford to keep stepping it up this week. No errors again. Near quarter against Hudson Young. Now this is going to be a real interesting battle. Hudson Young making his Origin debut a couple of weeks back there, didn't have the impact that everyone expected. Had a relatively quiet game again on the weekend. Nothing about him shone to me as a guy who's putting his hand up to be picked for State of Origin too. He may, look to fire up and make that impact this weekend to try and get himself back in contention, because I think there's a good chance he may not be selected if he doesn't. Up against Near Quarter, who had arguably his best game for the Warriors last week. Granted, he gave away a couple of errors, but his involvement, his aggression, his running, everything about him, I just felt he was so much more involved than we've seen him in any of the other games. So very interesting battle here. Very similar stats, again, right around the 100-metre mark for their running, right around the 90% mark for their tackle efficiency, 3 versus 4 tackle breaks, line breaks, 20 tackle breaks, 1 try versus 5 tries. So Young's got a try in him. They'll probably use him on, as one of those forward runners closer to the line there, running off a different angle there. But I think we've got that line defence to handle those forward runners who come in with a change of direction. I think it's more when we're getting spun wide that we get a little bit stripped for numbers from time to time. So I wouldn't hope that he's going to be too much of a threat for tries this week. But Neocotta's really going to have to step it up and bring that physicality and dominate a guy that's been known for playing on the edge. He's been suspended a number of times for doing silly things. So I'm going to call this one 50-50, if not slightly in favour of Neocotta based on last week's form, but curious to see how this one plays out. Then another really fascinating battle here with our captain fantastic Tohu, playing on broken legs but still getting the damage done. 10 games versus 13 here, 130 metres or 129 metres versus 112, not a big difference there. Both 95% tackle efficiency. What do you got there? Average tackles per game, 39 versus 33, so they both make a lot of tackles. Slimmer number of tackle breaks. Horsburgh with a couple of tries. Horsburgh right on the verge of potentially being called into that New South Wales, kill me for that, Queensland State of Origin team for Game 2. Tohu just looking to continue to lead from the front. Both will be looking to dominate the opposition and really set the platform for their team. He's a fiery young fella, this young Horsburgh. Seems a nice guy off the field, but he does, get fired up, pretty emotional. So I'll be looking to rile him up a little bit and see if we can't get him 10 in the bin from overreacting to something. Other than that, I expect Tohu's experience and just that work to get that slight edge over him, but he's definitely got to be someone for us to handle these. He's a bloody good tackler, not when you get past him. So let's see how that one plays out. Rightio, then the benches. A little bit of a difference here. We've gone for Sheridan, Curran, Barnett and Ali. So what have we got there? We've got a hooker come second rower come 5'8" cover. We've got another centre come second row there, or second row come centre there, and Curran really blew my mind with what he did out on the centres there for most of the game last week. Showed us, it's great to have that extra little bit of versatility there, to the point I'd rather see him go to centre than near quarter if someone has to in the future. Barnett, my man, coming off the bench last week, what a difference he made. That aggression in defence, no sense of self-preservation coming off the back of the neck injury, led the way. So looking for him to have a massive impact again this week. And Tom Ali, again, sort of flirting with being dropped out. I think if Dylan Walker was fit and ready, Ali would have been the one that dropped out. But I thought he stepped up quite well against the Dolphins on the back of sort of almost being dropped before being brought back in at the last minute. So what have we got there? We've got basically, all guys can cover pretty much every position. We've got the whole forward array covered there, plus the centres. At a pinch, Sheridan can play 5'8", so I think we're covered reasonably well. It's just the outside backs we have to be careful of this week. Up against, you've got Starling, Gula, Kotrick, and Solo. So Starling is a hooker, so we know he's coming on to play hooker, and that's pretty much all he does. He could probably play in the halves at a pinch. You've got Gula as a prop. This is odd having Kotrick there as a wing come centre there on the bench. I'm not sure if anyone out wide there's carrying an injury. 100% sure there. Maybe he's going to, they're going to have to use him in the forwards as, in their rotation if he gets on there. And we've got another prop. When you're looking at the impact, I think just the energy that Curran and Barnett bring get this one for us. Those two guys just bring so much when they come onto that off the bench, whereas all of these 3 or 4 of the guys for the Raiders, they all do a job, but I don't think they're going to turn a game. So for a couple of weeks in a row, I'm giving the bench to us. Just such a shame that Walker's still out there. I think as soon as he gets back, he just takes us to another level there. Hopefully he's back. We've got the bye next week, I think it is, so the week after that. Hopefully he's going to be back along with Tamati Martin as well. I think Jazz is probably still another 4 or 5 weeks away at least. I'm not sure if he's even running yet, and he said it was going to be about a month or so once he starts running. So I wouldn't imagine we look to him to get back until some of the very last rounds here, but I think Walker and Tamati Martin both come straight back in as soon as they're ready. Kossi is another one. He's meant to be back after the bye. Very curious to see what they would end up doing there if Ali has a massive game at centre. Then you've got a bit of a conundrum. I think Kossi was our form winger before he got injured. Dallon's really stepped up. It might even be Montoya, the one who's, he's been one of my favourites over the past couple of years. Form slightly dropped off, I felt, over the past few weeks. So really curious to see how those ones play out. But for this game, look, I think if we play our absolute best, they play their best, I think we've got slightly more in attack, and I think we've got the better defence. Playing at home, the 300th game, that'll be worth a couple of points to them, but it's not even a sellout, surprisingly. They've only sold about 20,000 tickets. You would have thought that they would have packed out the stadium, sold it out well in advance. Battle of two completely different styles of coaches. You've got one humble guy who's, very selfless, doesn't, buy into external conversations, versus, a guy in Ricky who just gets so emotional and is full of blame for everyone, throws his toys out all the time. Buddy's a really experienced, quality coach. He'll know how we play our game. A lot of the teams have started to figure us out a bit. It's not a very complicated game that we're playing. But understanding our game plan and stopping it's two different things, because I think we've got, it's not easy to control the way that we play with our outside backs taking those fast sit-ups, fast play of the ball off our line, which gets the momentum. It saves the energy for our middles to put a lot more effort into defence. And then, the big plays when we get up in the attacking half, whereas the Raiders are more traditional, maybe 1 or 2 runs by the backs before the forwards start taking the hit-ups off their line. So, I think they really started to fade in the last 20 minutes in the weekend. So I think, again, that's something that we've always been able to do, is finish really strong. But I think over there in Canberra, it's going to be important for us to start strong, get the first points on the board, and keep our noses in front. If we can be, 4 points ahead going into the last 20, I rate us to be able to pull away. So really looking forward to it. It's a Friday night game. It's the only way to start a weekend is with a Friday night win. It can be an absolute shit sandwich of a weekend if you don't. So it's always nerve-wracking. I'm really excited. I reckon the boys will get it done. Hope that you're all excited for it too. And, let's go for it. I'd love to see us put 30 points on them, maybe something like 30-12 to really rip the Croker 300th game 90 there. So let's go the Warriors. Make it 2 in a row.